Hey everybody, welcome back here on the podcast. We are a community of curious people looking to get better week after week. I have one ask for you and one offer. The ask is this: would you rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening? It's super helpful. And one offer: every week I send out on Thursdays a free weekly newsletter. It's called the Wise Letter, and the emphasis of the letter is to help you grow healthy, wealthy, and wise. And if that's something which, if you're part of this community, I imagine it is, that you're interested in, then go to thewiseletter.com. There's links in the show notes, and sign up for that so I can send you fresh content every Thursday. And with that, just so excited for this week's guest. It's my sister and my lead pastor, Natalie Aman, and we had an amazing conversation, and I'm excited for you to jump into it right now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Can I Ask You a Question podcast. I'm excited for today's conversation. I am with my lead pastor and my sister, Natalie Aman, formerly Natalie Schmelzer. And we have a lot of good memories, and we're going to have a great conversation today. Natalie and her husband, Riley, are the lead pastors of Joy Church in Medford, Oregon. Natalie is a wife, a mother, musician, an author, a world-class speaker invited to share at churches and conferences, and I believe one of the most intuitive leaders I know. Watch her blush. I believe this conversation holds something for everybody in our community. If you're a woman currently or preparing to lead in the church or marketplace, or a spouse and parent looking for wisdom and how to co-lead and maintain a healthy home, Natalie is the real deal. One of the most trustworthy, high character, high personal sacrifice leaders I know or have had the honor to be led by. So let's just jump in right now with today's conversation. Thanks again, sister, pastor, friend, and Natalie, for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. It's going to be fun, and love the podcast, and honored to be here and spend time talking.
Cool. Since we are siblings, we'll probably laugh more than most podcasts, and that's good. Okay. Jumping in with the first one I like to ask is just, what's one purchase of any price that has improved your daily life? And you can answer it in a couple different ways. A purchase, a subscription. We can get more answers are better than less. But what's one of them?
Man, that's a good question. I was thinking a purchase that I would highly recommend is our coffee pot. If anyone knows me, I love good coffee. And being a mom of 3 kids and all the things that we do, we purchased a coffee pot that makes delicious coffee but has a timer. And so every morning, wake up kind of smelling the smell of coffee. So that's a fun purchase, but it's actually been a really cool kind of tool for hospitality and kind of simplifying.
And you grind your own beans, but I can't remember if yours has that built in, or if it's a separate grinder.
Separate grinder.
Do you grind your own beans?
We grind our own beans, but purists would say grind them, then brew it. Don't leave it, overnight, but we sacrifice their coffee early.
I'm not convinced that that's worth the hassle. I think it's just fine.
Yeah.
Cool. Any others? Any subscription or anything, even as like a leader, this maybe helped you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this Audible, especially this season of life, wanting to stay reading and all of that, that's just an investment that I think is well worth it, to be able to get books of all different kinds. So that's been a really, really fun tool. A free one something I've been kind of getting into more is running, and Nike has a free running app that has plans and guided runs. And so you essentially have a running coach for free. So that's been a fun.
What's the app called?
Nike Run Club.
Okay, because there's Map My Run which I use by, I think, Under Armour.
Right, yeah.
And then, Nike's is the
Nike Run Club.
Nike Run Club.
Yeah, and they've got professional coaches coaching your run. And so from a health side, it's a free investment, but a great tool that I've really enjoyed.
That's cool. Okay, so for everybody that doesn't know you, and maybe I'll be surprised on something, if you had like 90 seconds going up an elevator to tell us a little bit of your story, where you've been, kind of the journey, and then where you're at now and what you're doing, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I both of us were raised as pastors' kids and raised in a home where not only was God valued and put first, but leadership. And so really kind of grew up in this house that was really a leadership factory. I mean, we were around so many leaders, and I think at a young age, didn't realize that God was merging two passions in my life, which were a passion for him, for building his house, and then a passion for leadership. Yeah. And so at a young age, just kind of in all means and ways, began to invest in being a leader and growing my leadership, and even in ways I didn't realize were growing that element. And so at a young age, just saw those passions merge and grow into them. And am I giving my whole life?
Yeah, but in 90 seconds, the summarized version,
Yeah, so I think probably around 15, made some life shifts, realizing that really what I wanted to give myself to was ministry and leadership, and graduated early, and 17 years old, crazy young, ended up stepping into leading in youth ministry, and that would mark kind of the next 13 years of my life.
We have a story on that, right? Our younger brother. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Tell us that one.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I'd been leading in our youth ministry for a lot of years, and the door opened where I was going to actually step in. I'd graduated early, was in our Bible college, and was going to take over the youth ministry. And our younger brother, it was, I think, his first year in the youth group.
Yeah, I think so.
And he was at that age where we didn't really give like privy information to what was happening behind the scenes in the church. And so the current youth pastor gets up and says, tonight we're announcing a brand new youth pastor that's going to be taking over the leadership reins. And our younger brother, sitting on the front row of the youth group, was like convinced it was another person.
Yeah, let's call her Susie.
Yes,
I know it's Susie.
I know it's Susie. And someone turned to him and they're like, it's Susie. And then they're like, it's Natalie. And here he is, 12-year-old Johnny, completely shocked, like, what? My sister's the new youth pastor?
She's the boss.
And kind of crazy that actually he was a junior hire in the youth ministry and would end up being the one who got raised up through the youth ministry and now is actually leading that very youth ministry.
How many years was that before that transition started?
That was probably about close to 10 years.
It's almost 10 years later.
Yeah, he would be the one, kind of getting announced. It's Johnny.
Not Susie again.
Not Susie. But I think in my 90-second elevator pitch, more and more, it took a while until I really realized how passionate I was to see people fully reach their potential that God had given them and to grow their leadership. And I really believe that everyone has a sphere and a space that they can lead, that they have the ability. And so it would be sometime later that I really, in kind of a wild way, realized I think I was like put on planet Earth to help people kind of discover their potential and push past fear to step into leadership.
Yeah.
And in that journey, there's a lot of twists and turns. I would say where I am today and my husband are today, like, it wasn't on the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, the 20-year plan. Like, a lot of my journey has just been marked by saying yes scared, saying yes when it didn't make sense, but seeing so many doors open and opportunities by just being available and ready to jump in. Yeah,
so cool. And so around 17, you took on your first major, you'd been leading for years, for those in the church world, those not, there's something called a youth pastor. They're the pastor, they're the leader of usually a junior high age person all the way up to a senior in high school or a little bit beyond. And so all of those people in that organization, that ministry, you're leading it at 17, did that for years and years, then took on lots of different roles within our local church where we both grew up.
Yeah.
And then including being the executive pastor.
Yes.
Co-executive pastor for a few years, managing staff and budgets, working with our lead pastors. And then March, right?
Yeah, March of 2023, this year.
You and your husband became the lead pastors of Joy Church Medford. And on, here on the podcast, a lot of people are churchgoers or Christian, and some are not. And so for a little bit of context, leading a church, contrary to popular belief, you do not just work on Sunday.
Correct. Yeah.
And you don't just go do house calls, handing out cookies or something.
Yeah. And you're not just praying in an office all day.
All amazing things, but and maybe there's a very large church where someone can just specialize, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But for the most part, lead pastors are managing. You manage a full-time staff of
about 9 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over 100 volunteers, I believe, at the within the church community. Hundreds of people in the community. There's a lot to it, from the financial and the facilities to, of course, and there's the biggest reason why we're all doing it is the spiritual element of leading people. What do you think is maybe something the people, Christian and non-Christian alike, might be surprised about the daily job of being a pastor, and particularly a lead pastor?
Yeah. I think, someone who's leading an organization would probably be familiar with, there's just a lot of decisions, and they're not always in the same track. So I think, as a lead pastor, you might be sitting in a meeting and looking at budgets, and then a crisis happens and someone needs wisdom for, crisis they're in, and you have to be able to kind of pivot and begin to give wisdom into a life situation. And then within a few minutes, you're in a counseling meeting, and then you're in a meeting, rallying people around a vision. And so I think it's just probably one of the things would be the amount that a lead pastor is just kind of, there's a lot of lanes that even if it's not your core focus, you're having to be able to pivot quite quickly to.
Lots of decisions.
A lot of decisions, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else I think is interesting within your story is that your husband is the co-pastor of our church, but he also has another approximately full-time career.
Right.
Can you walk us through that at all?
Yeah. My husband, Riley, he's educated as a chemical engineer and has spent his whole adult career in some form of engineering, management of teams, management of engineering. And so he really, while he's completely co-leading the church and pastoring, his 9 to 5 primarily is working in the marketplace, working in various forms of engineering and team management. And so I think even for us, there's this dynamic that a lot of people would find themselves in, is that when you've a husband and wife with 2 careers, you both carry an element of what the other person is. I think in a healthy marriage, you're a team, and you realize I don't see it like, oh, he's engineering and I'm pastoring. We really see it as we're doing it together, and though our 9 to 5s end up looking different, we're in it together. We're supporting each other. We're both giving feedback and input and bouncing ideas off each other. And so it definitely creates great challenges, but it also, I think, makes us better leaders and better even spouses, having to work together and champion the gifts and each one of us.
Oh, absolutely. And something, as we're just kind of really diving into this conversation, something I've come to believe through observation is that there's not a large difference between leading in a nonprofit or a for-profit.
Yeah.
And ideally, there shouldn't be a large difference between leading in a organization that is ethically driven, in this case by the Bible as a Christian church, or a business that would be hopefully driven still by the Bible and ethics and a care for their customers and a care for the process. In my experience as an entrepreneur, and then spending most of my life working with or in or for churches, but then seeing other businesses and things, that's what I've seen. Any thoughts on that? Would you agree with that, or would you see it a little bit differently? And then now with your husband who's in senior management or management within a for-profit company, but is also leading a nonprofit, would you say that's true, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that principles are in a lot of ways universal, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes just laws, and leadership. They work whatever industry, whatever spectrum, for-profit, nonprofit, ministry or not. And so I think the principles of leadership, they really are kind of universal. And then I believe that then when you're a follower of Christ, everything you do, like a driving principle from Scripture, is that everything we do is as unto the Lord. And so when I go into the office to do, what some people would say, the Lord's work, I actually don't feel that I'm doing something more valuable than when my husband goes into the office and does engineering, because the reality is, are we being faithful to what God's gifted us to do and called us to do? And are we doing it for the glory of God? And so I think, as followers of Christ, our example is to live a life of servanthood. It's to follow Jesus' example to serve and not to be served. So when you go into your industry, whatever that looks like, wherever your paycheck is coming from, you're really doing this for the Lord and doing it from a place of serving others and meeting needs. And I'm really like, this is something I could talk on all day and just passionate about, is I think so many people minimize their 9-to-5 job. They minimize their skills, thinking, is it significant? And I actually believe, like, God created us to work. He created us with gifts and abilities. And when we use that for his glory, like, we are displaying a picture of who God is. He's a creator. He's a worker. And so, that's kind of a long answer.
That's great. That's really good. You wrote a book using the biblical book of Nehemiah as kind of an outline for a process of leadership called Engage Leadership.
Yeah.
And it's available, I think, on Kindle and for print on Amazon. Is it still?
Yeah, you can. It's still, it hasn't sold out. It hasn't quite hit the New York Best Times yet, but maybe after this podcast.
New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, it's not there yet. Yeah, you can find it at natalieaman.com or Amazon, Kindle.
In a back alley in a truck selling the limited edition version, signed copies.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll see me there selling them.
Double the price.
Yeah, double the price, of course. Can you walk us just like in a brief outline through the steps of that book? Because I think that what we'll see in that is they would apply to both secular or non-secular leadership, profit or for-profit leadership, or non-for-profit leadership. What's kind of the outline? Yeah,
there's kind of three. What I see in leadership, whether or launching a vision, or it could be launching a business, building a team, I really see there's 3 stages. And the first one is innovate, and then motivate, and then activate. And kind of the idea is that there has to be
Say that one more time for everybody. The first step in that leadership journey, you're going to break it down for us. Innovate. Second one.
Motivate. And the third one is activate.
Okay, great. Please break that down for us.
Yeah, and I really think it's kind of a map that can work in a lot of things. Any sort of rallying people around a vision, rallying them around a business idea. And so I really see the first part, innovate, is kind of, that's the whiteboard, the blackboard. This is that moment where you as the leader, you as the vision caster, are kind of innovating. Hey, this is what I see happening. This is the vision of what I want to see accomplished, the business, the mission. And so this is kind of a really, in a lot of ways, kind of more of a private. This could happen over the, hours, days, months, weeks, years, this innovation stage.
Yeah.
What I find is a lot of times when leaders get through the innovate stage, they're ready to activate. They're ready to, like, let's just make it happen. But what happens is almost anything you're going to launch needs people behind it.
Yeah.
Right? It needs a team. And oftentimes, I find that in leadership, it's easy to skip the activating part and the motivating part and jump right to activation. But what happens is your team wasn't there when you were innovating.
Yeah.
Your team wasn't there when you got this brilliant idea, and when we try to immediately go to activation, maybe they'll do what you've asked them to do, but they don't carry the same passion.
They didn't go through the pros and cons. They didn't walk down a thought process and maybe go a totally different way and realize why it probably wouldn't work.
Right.
That you did, and so you're expecting them to just in a second do what took you months.
Yeah, as they're supposed to be just as passionate.
Aren't you excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, and they weren't there, right? I think when you've rightly motivated, it will go from being Gino's idea, Natalie's idea, it will actually become our idea, our thing. Like, and this is what we see in the journey of Nehemiah. This is like a real kind of diary of a leader. And Nehemiah has this burning passion moment. He gets a vision to rebuild the wall, but it actually comes to a point where he takes the time to motivate the team to where they were saying, like, we must rise up and build. And it went from being Nehemiah's vision to being their vision. And they were like, what's holding us back? We got to go. Yeah. And so it feels slower to go to the second phase of motivation, but suddenly you have a team around you who has the heartbeat of what you're doing. And now they're like, why are you keeping us from being activated? And I think that's the moment where you can really jump in and accomplish the mission. So
you've done the innovate, then you go to if you're doing it right, you go to your team, you don't skip it, you motivate, you get buy-in, you communicate to the people. I want to go back to that one in a second, because there's a few just thoughts and I think we could discuss. And then that third one is activate. Yeah. And that's is that the implementation?
Yeah, that's really, the implementation. I mean, really innovate is really ideation. And that middle part is really your feedback loops. You're motivating, you're really recognizing, is this a sure plan? Is this a viable product? And then implementation.
Let's launch the product. Yeah. Let's change the menu at the restaurant. Yeah. Let's add that extra service at the church for people that couldn't come in the morning. You're going to do an evening service. And that's, now we've launched it. Yeah. And
I would say, like, as a leader, sometimes insecurity or fear can cause us to want to skip the middle section. Yeah. Because if it's done right, like I said, I think at the end it leaves being like my idea, and it leaves being simply, this grandiose thing that I came up with, to being it may actually never even bear my name on it. It may become somebody else's thing, or fear of, like, what if it goes to the feedback loop and it gets shut down? What if eyes are seen on it and people don't like it, and so fear can just skip that middle section and want to go right to making it happen then here and now.
I think that's so true. What's interesting, maybe a little bit of bragging rights, an author that I believe we both appreciate, is Patrick Lencioni. Yeah. But no lawyers come after us if we're wrong. Maybe he came out with his idea first. If I'm wrong, but I think your book came out well before Ideal Team, or the 6 Working Geniuses, which we really like. Yeah. And no one's stealing anyone's idea here.
I love Lencioni.
But it actually mirrors that the 6 Working Geniuses. There are 3 basic steps within a process, and then the 6 kind of subtypes of personalities within a working team help you get through all 3. But that first one is that, I think his is ideate. Yeah. It's that dreamer phase. It's that, and that would be very similar to your innovation.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what they would call is, I think, the galvanize, or what's the term on that one? It's
I can't remember what the middle term is.
One of the personalities or the geniuses that is really good at that middle time is that galvanizer. Yeah. And I believe in that personality test per se, that's one of your strengths, right? Is galvanizing.
Yes, galvanizing.
And so in his process, you galvanize. You gotta get the people excited. You gotta get them on board. And sometimes you have an innovator, a scientist, or an inventor, but they can't get anyone to join their team. To fight for the cause. And then that final is, I think in his, is implementation.
Right. Yeah.
It might be in a iteration or something like that. No, that's probably not it. But then the final one is implementation. People just to get it done, and that'd be very similar. Yeah. To yours with activation.
Yeah, I think Patrick Lencioni might have read my book and then wrote his.
Been inspired.
I don't know.
We're not totally sure. Patrick, give her a call.
Yeah, I love
collab on the next one. I think that galvanizing one, that middle section of motivation, can you talk us through anything more on that, because of just why it's important, any practical ways to do it, because that is one, as someone who's got to lead under you and with you and to observe you, that you're really good at. But I also know actually you've sometimes struggled. You've also even wanted to skip it into implementation, into activation. But why? Because I think for so many of our people listening, whether they're a business owner, whether they're just whatever that thing they're trying to even lead a school, they could be in school and they're in a group project, and I think it's a big temptation to go from, I got a great idea, here it is, let's launch it tomorrow. Why do we have to not skip the middle step?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think there's like multiple layers to it.
Yeah, unpack it for a sec.
I think, specifically we're talking about gathering teams around it. I think sometimes we can think a good idea is like sugar and water. If water hits it, it's going to melt. And so kind of what I hit earlier.
You're too protective of it.
Yeah, you're too protective is just... something I hit on it in the book, but I talk about we all need someone with a red pen, and we both, our parents homeschooled us. Yep. And I remember I would write papers, and Mom would take my papers, and I hated this as a teenager and young person. She would take that paper and she would go over it and she'd hand it back to me, and there'd be like red pins, like, you didn't capitalize this and add a comma here and all of that. And I would be like, don't mark my paper, just
leave it be.
Let it be, just tell me and I'll change it. I'll go in and type something different. I hated the red pen. And later I realized, that is such a wrong perspective, that I actually had, and we had, someone in our life who cared enough to take the red pen so we could actually make shifts and changes and produce the best product and grow. And I realized, like, every one of us, we actually have to give people permission to have a red pen. Yeah. And to take an idea. And I think that's part of that middle stage. It's not only motivating people and getting them around the vision, but it's allowing the right people in that stage to take the red pen and give feedback and give thoughts and kind of work it backwards and forwards and help you produce, at least initially, the best version. And I don't think that keeps happening, on and on. But I think that's one of the things, is that not fearing feedback, not fearing correction, to make something better. Yep. And so now in my life, like, I wouldn't say I'm perfect at it, but I realize, like, I want other voices to help speak in and help me hit the mark to the best of my ability and the best of our ability. And so I think that's one benefit of taking time in that middle stage. Mm-hmm.
That's so good. I think, and to me, that part of it, it's almost, I'm realizing as you're talking, that middle stage, it kind of has two almost polar opposites, at least in how they appear to the outside world, is you need to talk a lot in the motivation stage, but then you need to listen a lot. Yes. And they're like different people. I think that's how I would see it anyway. It's like, hey, you gotta get excited in your own way, your own personality, and you gotta you gotta believe it. You gotta to pass it on to other people, so you got to pass them the ball with some gusto, so they know this. We mean ball here. It's serious. Yeah. But then you have to almost switch entirely, and let them pass the ball back. Let them get the red pin back. Let them, and it's difficult, right? To be like, I'm being vulnerable, and I'm telling you, it's a vulnerable thing.
It really is, yeah.
To let someone in on the ball game, like you've been playing your own ball game. Yeah. You're playing your own game, and you got your sandcastle, or mixing analogies here, and it's all nice. Yeah. And invite someone else onto your sandcastle.
Yeah, and then they actually start poking your sandcastle and going, "Hey, it doesn't stand." Yep. I think one of the scariest sounds in leadership in any team of people you're leading is silence. Mm-hmm. And when you come in and you bring an idea, you realize when the team is silent, it either means they've been shut down, they don't feel connected, or they feel there's no room to give feedback, to give thoughts. And that's true, like whether it's you're leading a staff, if you're in a small group of people that you're leading, whatever kind of, even with your family, with your kids, if it goes silent, you've lost their heart.
It's good.
And so I think in that middle stage, when you start hearing people chiming and they're getting passionate and they're giving feedback and they care, it's less about if actually what comes out is exactly what you wanted. If you can have the passion of the team behind it, you can keep making it better.
Yeah.
But if you have the best iteration and a silent, passionless team, it's not going to go very far.
Probably going to fizzle out.
Yeah.
Man, that's so good. That the most dangerous or the scariest thing to hear in leadership is silence, a pin drop. Because and it could be a lot of things that are wrong.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily know which one it is, but they don't feel safe. They're not compelled by your vision.
Yeah. They don't feel heard.
They don't feel heard. They don't think you're going to really respect it. It could be one or all of the above. And so it's for all of us leading. That's a red flag to avoid.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully that would help us even shift our mindset to get excited about somebody messing up our sandcastle.
Yeah.
Because it meant they cared.
Yeah. 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 If they're grabbing the marker and they're writing on the whiteboard with you, they've got some vision, they've got some passion, and you may have to redirect it and make sure the culture is right. But you don't want silence. You don't want, non-response.
There's that famous quote, I think it's General Patton in World War II, I believe, that kind of talks about the idea that, and I'm going to mess up the quote, but essentially a plan passionately executed now is way better than a perfect plan not done.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, hey, we got passionate. Let's go start iterating. Let's go actually go through the process, idea, motivation, activation, but we're working together. We're galvanized together. We're motivated together. We'll learn. Then we're just this analysis, paralysis by analysis, or whatever else is going on there. So good. Hopefully we'll get back to some more of just leadership nuggets as we go on, but we'll just keep going on with our conversation. Unless you had any final thoughts on that or anything from the book.
I think one of the things that maybe we'll hit on it more with leadership is I would encourage all of the listeners, you can lead. And the people are scared of that word sometimes, even they might be a great business entrepreneur and not see themselves as a leader.
Yes.
Or, you can be a stay-at-home mom, not see yourself as a leader. You have leadership potential within you. And I think don't be afraid of it. And one of the things is that I believe there are people that are born and they have maybe a stronger propensity and gifting for leadership. But I believe leadership can be developed. It can be grown. And so I think wherever you're at, if there's a hunger in you that feels like, oh, I could never accomplish this burning vision in my heart because I'm not a leader, like, you don't limit yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And invest in your leadership, invest in the tools. But I think so many people, they live in this world where they disqualify themselves before they ever enter the game because they feel like I don't have leadership ability. And that's kind of the heart of the book, is like, engage leadership. Like, it takes courage. It takes stepping out, doing the scary thing. But wherever you're at, you can grow your leadership. You can help accomplish a mission.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that would be, kind of a thought from the book.
Okay, enough going easy on you. You gotta earn your green tea there.
Yes.
So it's already been excellent, and I love just the conversation so far. Help us, because I want people to get this. We're gonna go kind of speed round. I want you, if you're willing, I want you to kind of walk us through, just as it comes to mind, how, and I'll give you a few different cues, this kind of person could step into leadership.
Yeah.
And it can be exactly the book pattern, or it could be just a rough thing. So the first one is that mom. Mm-hmm. How could a mom raising a couple of kids? You're in that season of life right now. She could be a full-time homemaker, or she could be also in the marketplace. But how could she step in and be a leader? How can she be a leader? I believe it, but how could she be a leader?
Well, I think first and foremost, you're leading your children at home. So one is, I think, there's all the sayings, leaders are readers, I forgot. Leaders or feeders, the rhyming things. But I do think that no matter where you are, I think it starts with the hunger to learn.
Yeah.
So maybe it means, hey, if I'm going to lead my children, I need to get better disciplines at home and get a better schedule. And so maybe it's leading on time or reading on time management, and then beginning to set these practices at home and casting vision to your kids even. Okay, kids, we're going to get up at this time and do these projects because these are the kind of people we are.
Here's this new family calendar I bought. We're going to fill it out together, and you're motivating.
Exactly. And then I think there are so many opportunities. My world happens to lean heavily in the church world. And I would just say there are so many opportunities in probably any church context where you can reach out and just say, I have nap time that I can begin to invest. From home, I can work remote, but I can make calls or I can schedule a team and just begin to take on leadership responsibilities in the space that you have, right? It might mean taking on leadership and coaching your kids' soccer team, coaching. But I think it's just beginning to say yes to, the small group says, who's going to make this schedule? Hey, I'll do it and I'll make the call and I'm going to cast a vision to, I like it. Recruit people.
And so that theme, I'm going to ask you get a couple more examples of that so people can see themselves in this. But it's the message I'm hearing is, hey, everyone can and probably should engage in leadership within their context.
Yeah.
And I think another one's kind of a shameless plug. We both have that same heart. We want to see everybody step up into the leadership God has called them to, as there's different levels of leadership, but it's probably very like essential, and maybe you could say lowest is not the right term, is service.
Yeah.
Everyone should be serving. Everyone can contribute value.
Yeah.
Then there's higher levels of leadership, but at the very least, we can all lead through service, lead through example, lead by adding value, and everyone absolutely has value to add.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm hearing so far in the conversation is that, hey, let's not allow our circumstances are not an excuse to not lead.
Correct.
If I said that right, that don't let that. Not that sometimes I'm not saying anyone has bad motives, that we're trying to hide from it. Sometimes that can happen. But it's like if you're like your husband and you're working in the marketplace and you're also leading in a nonprofit, like you can do it.
Yep.
If you're a mom or a dad and you're also raising kids, you could still lead. You're never too busy to lead.
Correct.
If you're a full-time homemaker, a mom or a dad, you can lead.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we can think of a scenario in which there's not something.
Right. And leading, you're literally like moving people from here to there. You just think about there's always, right. So even parents, sometimes I'll hear, my kids don't do this thing. We have a leadership problem.
Yeah.
Because lead them into an understanding of why we do chores, right? Mm-hmm. It's simply like, that's a form of leadership, is leading them to a higher vision. My kids don't want to do homework. Well, you got to begin to cast a vision for them that sees beyond.
Yeah. Come up with 3 ideas to try.
Yeah.
In the innovation phase. If you don't have one idea didn't work.
Yeah. Try round 2 and
keep trying. Then you go into the motivation and then, hey, we're going to activate. We're going to try this one.
Yeah. This is what we're doing. We're going to take the next 8 weeks and here's our schedule and we're going to beta test it and see how it works. And, but I think sometimes we just overcomplicate leadership and we think, leadership is a microphone. Leadership is, the reality is there's a lot of people that carry a leadership title and they're actually not really leading anyone anywhere. Mm-hmm. But a leader moves people. So sometimes there's people, I saw that a lot as a youth pastor. I would see young people who had 0 title, that had a lot of people following them. They were leading them somewhere. And so I think a lot of people don't realize your leadership is leading somewhere. You just may not be intentional about it. And so we want to be intentional leaders who make sure we're leading in the right direction.
That's good. Okay, how about, so we've talked about, hey, that stay-at-home, full-time homemaker mom or someone like that. How about a full-time work, and we'll just go with a guy.
Yeah.
A full-time working man. How can, is career stopping him, or how can he lead? How can he he's working full-time. How can he still lead?
Yeah, I think one of the things is lean into where you are. So I think sometimes what we do is we think, I want to be a leader. And if you're not currently leading in your work environment, then you think I can only grow my leadership outside my work environment.
Yeah.
But the reality is you actually in your 9 to 5 can probably be getting leadership skills developed.
Yeah.
Most companies are looking for leaders. They're looking for someone who says, hey, I will take responsibility. I will, work with the team on this level. Most managers want leaders to emerge. And so I think, this is real time for my husband and I, because the role he is in his career is he's risen to leadership, and he never really set out initially he was an engineer, but wherever he's gone, he's ended up going into leadership, because it's in him to go, I'm not just going to do my job. I want to help do my job and lead others to do a great job as well and serve. And so he's kind of grown. And so a lot of his leadership he's growing is actually in his normal job that he's then bringing into leading people, right? So I think practically most organizations have some sort of review, whether it's yearly, quarterly. Share with your manager, hey, what's a pathway I can grow my leadership? What's one book that this company is built on that would help me develop my leadership? And just ask. And actually, most companies, when you just ask a leadership, like, hey, I want to grow my leadership, that immediately sends like a flag of like, hey, this is someone we can pour into and develop, right? Most organizations even have like scholarships available that if you want to grow your leadership, a lot of organizations will pay for further education. They'll pay for you to get a certification. And I feel like anytime you grow your leadership, it helps you across the board.
Yeah. That's so good. Anytime you grow leadership, it does it. It expands and touches in other places. Staying on the theme of leadership, what advice do you wish you could have given your younger self just starting out in ministry and starting out in leadership?
Yeah.
Just that was the main context.
I think one, I would tell younger Natalie, be more present. So I think as a leader, one of the ways I can hurt myself as leader, but hurt the team I'm leading is, naturally I'm probably more of a visionary. I love vision. I love the next thing, the 5-year plan. But oftentimes in early leadership, especially, we would be at what I'd innovated, our team had motivated, and now we'd activated, and I was already back at innovation. And the team needed to just sit in the celebration. And not just the team, I did too. I needed to sit and be like, wow, we accomplished something. This was effective. So I think I would say, and I would tell myself this still, be present, take it in. Celebrate when you hit the milestone, celebrate the small victories and the big victories, right? I think I would also say relax. Like, don't be so uptight, There were probably things today that I would go, I probably should have cared more about that thing that was underneath, but I cared about a lot of surfacey things that really weren't the heart of the problem, if that makes sense. And so I think I would take a chill pill, relax, and when I say relax, not lean in, but just not be so uptight,
I think when you allow frustration to take over or impatience to take over, when you're impatient, by very definition, you lose the ability to be patient.
Yeah.
And I've learned that so many problems will made worse by impatience.
Yeah.
By rushing the conversation, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I know a saying that our dad would always say is let the play develop. Mm-hmm. Just let it develop. Like sometimes, it was rushing a conversation. It was making a decision too quickly. Or even times that I realize now, there are things that I was building towards that if I had accomplished then, I wouldn't have been ready to handle it. And so I'd be frustrated instead of realizing, okay, this is like maybe a capacity issue,
Yep.
or it's a timing issue, and not beat myself up and feel like I failed, but learn from it and realize, oh, you only build, strength through resistance. And so I'm not going to get to the next rung of weights if I don't learn to carry the capacity of this stage I'm at.
Yep.
So I think looking back, I realized that was a capacity issue. That was a timing issue. And I probably beat myself up, felt like a failure, got discouraged and stuck.
Yeah. From a spiritual perspective, maybe you're praying to God, Lord, expand this ministry, this community we're building, and it's his will to expand it.
Right.
But the reality on the ground was that maybe in this made up scenario, but this has probably been all of our scenario, is that maybe the leader wasn't ready for that expansion. They couldn't handle it. Maybe if quadruple amount of people came, the leaders that would be there to pastor and walk those people, or in business terms, onboard those people, wouldn't have been ready, and it would have just been kind of wasted.
Exactly.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. It was like if God answered my prayer in that moment, I would have been praying, and why'd you do this, Lord? Now I'm sinking in problems or whatever, because I hadn't actually developed the team, or I wasn't ready to handle that thing. And so looking back, I realized, oh, that wasn't a failure. That was growth happening, and actually the grace of God to kind of not allow maybe what I desired to happen as quickly or in the way that I envisioned it happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of making even a slight shift in our conversation, still on leadership, but kind of starting to transition into maybe like the next level of leadership.
Yeah.
Thinking of people who are watched on here and they're like, you've been leading for decades. This has been your world. Pastors might be watching or listening, business people watching or listening. And so kind of just the shift in that conversation there. I think there's something worth talking about, just about that patience, about not getting discouraged in building out your team, building out your foundations. I know it's a challenge for me.
Yeah.
We on the podcast recently had a young farmer on, and he's talking about things that that won't probably bear fruit for this couple of years, and you got to do that. And I think it was from that conversation that I was just thinking about it and realized kind of what we're talking about. That sometimes I'm mad at I'm like frustrated, or I feel guilty that I can't produce X, Y, or Z result, and I realize it's really not it's probably not very helpful or productive to feel guilty about like that your new tree isn't producing massive fruit.
Yeah.
Instead, protect the tree, grow the tree.
Yeah. Enjoy
the tree when it's a tiny baby tree, when it's a tiny baby organization. Yeah. And any thoughts on that? Have you ever had that journey, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, man, I think that's a constant, right? Because I think every season there's always another. So it's like you get to you climb one mountain and there's another peak, and then you're like, am I failing, or did I miss it? And I think, something recently I'd been sharing on at our church in the area of faith. And, the Bible talks about a hero of faith was Abraham. Like he's like the father of our faith, really. And from like promise given to promise held in his hands was 25 years. And then there was more tests, and it was a longer journey, but like it was a 25-year journey to literally just hold the promised child that God had given. And one of the thoughts was that if we bypass the journey, like if Abraham had held the promise right when the promise was given, he wouldn't be the Abraham, who he was at the end of the journey allowed him to probably appreciate the promise more, allowed him, like part of the journey was the miracle. Part of the journey was, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like discouragement, we don't realize like actually the delay in seeing that thing that I want to happen, the delay in seeing, breakthrough or whatever, is actually, if I walk that journey right, it's forming me into the kind of person who could actually handle the success at the end of the other side.
Yeah, if Abraham had got it soon, maybe we wouldn't like the Abraham that had gotten the promise.
Right. But he became like one who had wrestled this through with the Lord. He was able to vocalize the discouragement. He was able to keep trusting. He was able to keep helping other people possess their promises and get victory and help other people. And he got there, and now like he not only held the promise, but he held being formed by the promise giver, by God. And I think sometimes something I'm learning, I'm in the, like literally right in the process of this being formed, is I think I often didn't give God thanks for the fact of what he shaped in the journey. Like I was more frustrated by the journey than like, wow, I actually like who I am more on the other side because I, Lord willing, have been formed more into the image of Christ. I hopefully, right? Like, so even like part of what makes great leaders is actually the pain of the journey they walk through. It's the disappointment. It's that they still keep showing up and serving others and leading others when they didn't see the win like they thought they would. And yet they still celebrate, right? And so I just think like, I don't want to be someone who gets the promise, but bypass the journey that God had for me, or, you know, gets the victory, but everyone on your team hates you. You hit the milestone, you hit the target of whatever the goal was, but your family's broken.
Yeah, very short-sighted achievement sometimes you can hide it for decades.
But you get to the end of your life and your kids hate you.
Eternal perspective, no.
And so I think delay, like for that leader, is it's if you keep showing up, you're winning. Like, you know what I mean? In the sense of now get better. And if if you keep striking out, figure out, is there a correlation to something I'm doing? But so many people so many people that are like heroes in our eyes, right? People that we go, man, they hit the mark. You find out like they still faced the same giants, the same trials, the same discouragement, but they just kept showing up. And I think that's like great leaders. They don't quit. And people of faith, they don't quit. They keep showing up. They show up when it's easy, when it's hard, when it's, and I find sometimes it's like, okay, I don't feel like I have the best to offer, but I'm here and I'm going to keep showing up. And all of a sudden in those moments, there's fresh grace, there's fresh wisdom.
Yeah, I think that's so good. Jumping back and forth between the seasons of life and leadership, for those that maybe are on the edge of leadership and deciding, and you hadn't seen yourself maybe in this conversation, you're going to choose to engage in leadership. I think what we've hopefully shown in the conversation is that everyone's eligible, and there's a way for everybody. Then whenever there's a way or a possibility, that kind of subtly opens up a bit of both a responsibility. But I want to emphasize less than even the responsibility, because I'm not here to guilt you, but not an opportunity. There's that, hey, if there's an ability, then there's an opportunity. And I think as we shift into that, okay, there's an opportunity for me to be a leader. There's this, I could do something. Then I think the next proactive step is that training you were talking about, is that reading, is that developing. And I think in some senses a defining trait of a leader this is the decision that's made at some point. And I think to become a leader, you kind of have to make this decision if you're a good leader. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I think a scary leader is one who's just purely angry. I think a scary leader is one who's leading out of fear, and they're just trying to absolutely take control. I think what the world needs more of is leaders who have made a faith decision that I can be a part of God's changing in this world. I can be a part of making the world better. I can be a part of the redemption process. And so therefore, and that's kind of an audacious step to think it's possible, I can do it, and I will step in. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is, like you said, we're not trying to like lay guilt trip, like you got to do it. But it's a weighty thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that when I read through scripture, you don't really see oftentimes leaders that emerged. They didn't necessarily, they didn't feel like entitled to it, right? It wasn't like, I'm a leader, God, you better choose me. Like, in scripture, David's son, he's a king in the Bible, and his son Solomon comes in, and his prayer is like, God, give me wisdom to lead your people. Like, he didn't come thinking like, I am God's gift to these people. It was like, oh God, would you give me your wisdom to lead them, right?
Yep.
And I think you see Esther in the Bible, like God literally used her to be a deliverer of her people. And it actually started with her uncle being like, hey, Esther, like you are in your position. You got to make a decision to lean in and lead.
You can do something. You have an opportunity.
You have an opportunity. And I think when we look at the world around us, the world doesn't need more armchair quarterbacks. We don't need more people that are just criticizing how terrible, when God has given us the ability to rise up and be a part of change, be a part of leading, be a part of, right? I may not do, there will be billions and billions and billions of people. The large majority of the whole world, the large majority of Medford will have no clue where I live, will have no clue who I am, but God has given me a sphere of influence. And my job is not to question, and live in fear or live in anger. It's to simply say, okay, God, whatever the sphere is you've given me, whether it's to lead 3 people, 300, 3,000, fill in the blanks, I want to be faithful to that. Is that kind of, where
That's
you're
great.
going? And so I think, I think one, like the opportunity to be a part of change is a gift from God. And I think it is our response.
Can I, for just one sec?
Yeah.
You helped me kind of broaden it. What I heard from you, I think we would agree, fearful leaders, not ideal.
Yeah.
Angry leaders, not ideal. Not that you can't be angry against injustice.
Right.
And I was saying they need to be hopeful leaders.
Yes.
But what I kind of almost heard in what you're saying more is they need to be leaders. They need to be loving leaders. They need to love something. There needs to be the skin in the game. I don't want to see my, we don't need more armchair. I'm not going to just be a critic.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just see the world go to trash. I want to fight for my family. I want to fight. That's kind of that was the spirit what I heard from you right there.
Yeah. And I think I don't just want to be a reaction to what's around me.
Yeah.
I want to actually be a partner with who our God is, which is a creator. And I want to be proactive in actually creating what God's calling us to be a part of, right? So I don't just want a marriage that's a reaction to everything. I want to build a marriage that's follows the example of Christ and is right. And so if everything is I just don't want to be my parents, or I just don't want to be that, I think that's an ultimately unhealthy thing. Instead of going, take the best, I honor what I received in from this or that, but this is what I get to be a part of building.
Mm-hmm. I'm motivated by love. I'm filled with hope, and I'm gonna get to work.
Exactly. And so I think it's hope filled, it's proactive, and it's realizing, none of us get to choose the sphere, right? Like the scope necessarily of our leadership capacity. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I'm trying to learn, is being comfortable in. I don't want to limit and lead less than I'm supposed to, but I also don't want to lead or live discouraged because I don't have someone else's sphere of influence. Yeah. And so, but we all have a sphere of influence, and whatever that is, we have a responsibility to hope-filled, lovingly lead in that sphere, all in, and make an impact wherever we have.
That's good. Okay, now jumping back to that experienced leader, or that, and that's a really broad term here. Yeah. That parent that's been leading their family. Something that I've observed, in the opening of this conversation, I talked about you're a high sacrifice leader. You're a high personal sacrifice leader. I've seen you personally go through a lot of challenges and just stay stay faithful. What would you say to that person? There's a story. I mean, I've seen you just kind of at your most broken and then get back up and keep leading and keep showing up. So I respect that. I honor that in you. What would you say to that person that's listening right now and they're just on the ground? They don't know. They had hope once. They still love the family, the organization, the business, but they've just been gut punched.
Yeah.
What from your experience would you say to that person to maybe get back up?
Yeah. If I could answer that with a bit of a story.
Yeah.
I remember, there's been multiple, we all have pain. We all have gut punching moments where you want to throw in the towel, where you kind of go, why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I a fool? Mm-hmm. And then ultimately remember, Christ is our ultimate example. And, he literally from the cross said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's our example, and that's humbling. And, I'm not there, right? I aspire to follow Christ's example. But I remember there was this moment, and I was really kind of distraught in some things, and maybe a little bit on the verge of feeling disillusioned. And I remember was newly married, and my husband, this was all like a little bit newer to him, kind of the level of leadership. And I remember we were standing in our condo, early married, and I'm tears streaming down my face. And I just remember crying and saying to him, I just want my heart to be okay. Like, I don't, no matter what, like if my heart is wrong before God, if I get a hard heart, everything's kind of lost. Mm-hmm. Like I could even go through the motions, but I remember just crying, and he stared at me trying to console me, like, what are you talking about? And I actually ended up in this, like a day later or so, I had to go to this church conference. No one knew what was going on. Someone prayed for me, and they started praying. They say, I just believe God wants you to know, like, he sees your heart, and it's good. And like, I would be the only, me and Riley be the only ones that knew that cry. Yeah. But why I tell that story was that I knew in that moment, if in this moment I lose my heart, and I believe God can, if your heart is at that place where it's it's hardened, it's hurt, it's discouraged, it's closed off. But in the similar, there was a painful moment that we went through, and there was kind of this moment where some people we were pouring into, they walked away, and we got in the car after this difficult conversation, and my husband Riley looked, and he said, the next people that come into our life, we have to love them just the same as them. We cannot stop loving. Yeah. And why I say that is, I think in leadership, our heart is like the Bible says, guard your heart above all else. If we lose our heart, if we lose the tenderness before God, the softness for people, if we lose that just softness, right? You could carry the same role, you could do the same things, and you're really a lost leader, lost person. And so I would say to that person who's discouraged, who feels like, I don't know if I can get in the game again, just tell you, get in the game again. You actually will be a better leader, a better follower of Christ, someone that I think is worth following when you actually have scars. When you've made the conscious decision. Yeah, when you go maybe that was wrong, or maybe I was the offender, or maybe right? It's not always, sometimes we're broken because of our own decisions, but to get back up, let God work in your heart. And it's not just ignoring it ever happened. I think we actually have to stop and realize, hey, there's still some stuff there that needs to get healed. There's still some things I need to process. It's not sweeping it under the rug, but making a conscious decision. I'm going to get back in the game. I'm going to love the next person that walks through those doors. I'm going to pitch the vision again, and stay in the game. Yeah. I think, and this is maybe putting a little bit of a heavy on people, but I've not seen, I don't think that leaders can run away from their leadership moment
and be okay. I think that they have to. I think they would have to renounce that, fix that. I don't think they're gonna walk out that door unscathed.
Yeah.
I think the only way to actually kind of walk out unscathed quicker is through the problem.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I actually don't know that you can be a leader and not run into the pain. They're just. It is like, by definition, a leader, like they're to be the leader of something, you're in the front, in the sense, right? Like if I'm a leader vehicle, I'm in the front, I'm leading, I'm directing. And if I'm unwilling to lead into the heart of the problem, the heart of, and be courageous. And I just, leadership takes courage. In any area of your life, doing the right thing takes courage. Being a person of character takes courage. It takes the ability to say, I will stand even if no one stands with me. I will love even when others are persecuting and reviling.
Absolutely. And I guess what I mean, I'd be interested in your thought on it, is definitely you can't keep staying in that position of authority and being a someone that makes the world, like using kind of biblical language. Bible talks about, like, compares leaders or servants of God to like a fruit-bearing tree. So that there would be a term in biblical language like to bear fruit. You're fruitful. You're a farm that's producing something of value. I totally agree with you that you can't keep producing value if you run away.
Yeah.
But I guess the way I sometimes think in my head is I feel like I know, or I've been as a leader sometimes, is, hey, I'm not really concerned with producing more value. But I don't want the field. I'm not really preoccupied with sowing new seed and tilling new fields. But the fields I have, I don't want them to go sour. I don't want them to get rotten. Mm-hmm. I think it's one thing to be a fruitful leader, and then I think it's the other to be a good person.
Yeah.
A healthy person. And that's more what I was saying with it, is that I don't think you're going to like the person you are if you walk away from love and hope.
Yeah.
And what was our third one in leadership? Love, hope, and proactivity, or?
Yeah, being a proactive leader. Yeah.
I think, and that's
not reactionary.
And that kind of makes you stuck, but it's better to know the truth than to be deceived. And that's just in my observation. I'd be interested in your thought on that. I think, but we've seen a lot of the same people, and when they get pessimistic and believe, I guess we can't change the world.
Yeah.
They carry that. So I'm leaving ministry, or I'm quitting that job, or we're going to close our business. They carry that pessimism until everyone can change, but they carry that into the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think when they give up on a relationship and they get close, someone hurts them and they just protect their heart, they carry that close-heartedness into the next thing. And sometimes to me, I'm like, I'm not, other people can be fruitful. It's changed on your worldview, might disagree with that, but I definitely don't want to be a bad field.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is totally hitting where you're going. I think we have to remember we're not like multi-people.
Yeah.
So I think the kind of easy lie to believe is, well, I'll just, in my career, I will be this kind of person. In my home, I will be this kind of person, right? So maybe it's like we're one person.
Yeah.
And actually, when I retreat and I close off in one area of my life, it affects the whole of who I am and what I'm doing.
Yep.
And I think sometimes we think, well, I can be hurt, or I can close off or lose hope and get disillusioned here, and it won't affect how I raise my kids, or
but
it won't
does.
affect 100% does. And the scary thing is, I think we live in a really individualistic culture.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we're hurt, the natural response is hide.
Yeah.
Right? It's fight or flight. So we're either throwing punches or we're running away. And it's actually in those moments of pain, in those moments of disillusionment, we got to get somebody with the red pen. We got to get somebody in our world that says, am I seeing this right? Or am I responding right? Does that make sense? Like, I think it's in those moments where you want to throw in the towel. You got to get, and I wouldn't even say just peers. Like, you got to get somebody who is willing to say, the hard thing to you, someone who has some perspective even further than you to go,
Yep.
You're not going to like the fruit of not planting new fields.
I think partly what I was saying, I think you're agreeing with it, but if not, everyone put words in your mouth, say, you can let me know, is that one of the things at stake, and in my opinion, the biggest thing at stake, is your own soul.
Yeah.
In those leadership crises.
Yeah.
That if you don't deal with this right, you're not good, and that's at stake. So you have to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think because we share history as siblings and
Yeah.
in church leadership, and now you've led me for pretty much my whole ministry. You've been my leader of some kind.
Well, and I'm your older sister.
You're my older sister, so bossing me around all my life. Doing
now
great
you're bossing me around on this podcast.
on the podcast. Man, I got distracted with that. But we've observed a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of the same history. And I think I did lose my train of thought on that, but just not it was kind of this. I think I would have left ministry or left leadership at times if I saw any path that I could have in a healthy way done it.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's another way.
Yeah.
I don't mean that you need to keep your position or your title, but I think living proactively in hope and love and believing the world can be better and trying to make it better, I don't see any way that's better than that. I don't like any other version of my story that doesn't involve that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that's just been my observation, and I feel like it's kept us through a lot of things.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on that, and we'll keep kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I think probably just with that thought is I want to get sweeter and softer and more tender the longer I lead people, love people, right? So I think the danger is the more you see the propensity of people, the more you see the negativity of the world, the easier it is to become less hope-filled and I actually believe by the grace of God, and he's given us intentional tools to say, I'm actually choosing to live in the opposition of the gravitational pull to close off, to be hard, to run away, to retreat. And so I think you got to keep vision in front of you of people that they stayed tender, they stayed loving people, they stayed being contributors in making a change in society. Yeah, that's so true. And that I was just, as you're talking, I was like, oh, okay, you're helping me see okay, that's the next element of the health step is I kind of framed the questions and then when's your back to the wall, but what do you do? And you just kind of, I think, answered it. What do you do to not get your back in the wall? And what do you do to have the strength so you can get out of that place? And then it gets cultivate love. Yeah. Cultivate hope. Cultivate a care for your business, your community, your church. And that is essential to carry you through and forward. Yeah. Is that kind of what you were saying? Yeah. Totally. And I would say you said something there that I think is important in our life. I remember a leader from a church in a completely different state. It was right before I got married. I was just engaged. And this leader and this pastor and his wife, they had come and ministered at our church. And right before they were going to fly out, I went and met them for coffee. And we were just talking life and stuff. And I remember this pastor looked at me, he said, as you keep growing in leadership and you keep getting older, there are going to be good people and people that they even love God. They have all these things, but you are going to have to guard the relationships you have in your life because they may be good people who keep you from the God thing because they don't. Right? So sometimes we make these claims. They're like, oh, they're good because they have similar-ish values. And it's not a question of if they're good or bad, right? Yeah. But it was this warning that this pastor gave to me and just saying, as you step into all that God has and you step into marriage and you step into these things, the voices and the community you have around you are vital. And I think sometimes I just realized more and more the voices I have, the people I have around me, doesn't even mean that, hey, I don't love you, you're not in my sphere, but the people we give permission to really even be a shaping voice in our life, it's so vital. And that's in any level, in leadership, and like, just because like not everyone should have permission into the core of who you are.
Yep.
And you have to have a vision of like, what is God asked of me to do, and who has he called me to be? And am I actually surrounding myself with people that are in that trajectory, that have hit that mark?
Yep.
And realizing like there's people that are like, man, I love you, I honor you, I bless you, but they don't necessarily aren't going to speak into like the shaping. Doesn't mean I can't learn from them.
Yep.
But I just think community is so vital.
Yes.
Like, and we say that, right? Like we were like, friends are like elevators, but sometimes we don't realize it's just that neutral level. It will actually cause you to decrease.
Yeah, 100%. Just today I was with someone close, and in a casual way, we just had a little conversation. I just kind of was trying to encourage them in a certain area, just kind of bump them that direction. And that's what good friends are always doing for each other. We're just either intentionally or almost on accident. Hey, I'm going to this development conference, and then you want to come? I'm going to the gym. You want to come? Or I'm going to the gym, and it triggers. Yeah. Maybe I should go to the gym. But when everyone around you, I'm going to this self-destructive place, I'm giving up. It either dulls you or it actually triggers you to go downwards. Yeah. It's very, very powerful.
Absolutely. And I think like insecurity, complacency, fear could all be reasons that sometimes we will surround ourselves with people who make us overly comfortable, or always encouraged to the path of least resistance. And that you have to make a decision like, I want to be surrounded by people who are smarter than me, better than me, challenge me, make me feel uncomfortable at times because of their excellence, because of their tenderness, their love for God, right? And like you don't just get that by happenstance. It is an intentional decision because it's uncomfortable. I remember a few weeks ago, I was at an event and I was sitting at a table and I was thinking everyone at this table is smarter than me and has like, I'm like trying to keep up with the conversation, and I loved it. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying that I'm like so smart, so it's not like that but I'm just saying like
that was the right place to be.
It was the right place to be, to feel challenged, to be going, I need to read that book, I want to lean into that thing. And you have to like, but it required like even to be at that table, sacrifice of driving multiple hours and there was some sacrifice to make a way to sit at that table. But I want to be in environments where I'm being challenged, I'm being sharpened, I'm being encouraged. Those bumps you're talking about.
Yeah. And I know I've seen that in your life. That's been a theme, is that you honor other people and their gifts. And I've seen you just for years be willing to put yourself into an uncomfortable position to humbly learn from people, and it's produced great fruit, and it's a wise thing to do. I think the kind of leaders I love to learn from most are, and I think I don't know how many people are like this. I think the good ones, in my opinion, didn't forget where they came from. Yeah. And I think that's important to remember, because like, well, they're wealthy now, and I'm not wealthy. We have nothing to relate with. But I think of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his production company is
Good old Dwayne.
It's called $7 Productions, and that's because he remembers when he was a poor kid with only $7. No, I think man at that point, or young adult, with only $7 to his name, and he hasn't forgotten. And I'm sure there are definitely challenges as you get higher. You might lose some sense of connection, but he at least references that story, and that's why he named his production company that. And I think we sometimes think, oh, that wealthy person, they can't relate to me as a young person building wealth. But it's like, no, they remember what it's like when they couldn't afford that. Yeah. They remember the challenges. But they also remember how to beat the level. Yeah. How to get through. Yeah. They remember when their church was small and now it's big. Yeah. They remember when their business was small and now it's big. And I think I used to be a lot more afraid. I'm still working on that. And it's so important what you're saying, to put yourself in front of those people. Yeah. And I think they'll probably be a lot more compassionate and understanding and willing to help than we, I think, often fear. Yeah. Absolutely. I think, this is like, I am convinced that honor, it's
it's the way of God. Like he, honor opens doors we could never open.
Yeah.
And that's not flattery. Honor is not flattery. Honor is not,
Yep.
just saying random things to people to make them feel good. But there's something about when you honor the gift in somebody, when you honor them, to listen to them, to lean in, to ask questions, to let them ask questions. I believe honor allows you to receive the best from people. Like it just breaks a wall down. And I've seen that where there's moments I'm like, I should not be getting the wisdom I'm getting, the answers I'm getting, the time I'm getting, like, but honor opened the door, humility, and being willing to just, like, I just think so many people are willing, like you're saying, to give you their best, to give you their time when they sense an environment of honor.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's scary, it's uncomfortable, but I think honoring gifts and people. I remember years ago, like when podcasts were like a recorded message. It was less like this,
Yeah.
And I remember like even saying as a young leader, like, oh yeah, I'm being mentored by, and I would, fill in the blank, this pastor. I never met him. I never knew them, but I actually believed, like, I may not be able to sit at a table with them. And this was all new. Now we have access to a lot of that, but I'd listen to those messages and receive it like as if I was there.
Yep.
Right. And honor. And like, I think I really was like impacted by their leadership. They don't know me. They don't know they made an impact in my life. And if they had the opportunity. And actually recently there was a youth pastor who's one of the, a youth pastor that impacted my life. I would go and hear at these conferences. Yep. And unbeknownst to me, I actually was able to share a message, and he was there. Never met him in my life. And he came up and said something to me, and I just said, sir, you impacted my life, and was able to like get to tell someone who was one of those kind of mentors from afar.
Full circle moment. Yeah. So good. Well, I've loved our conversation on just leadership, and I hope that everyone listening, that you would apply it to your sphere of influence, your area of opportunity right now. Whether that is business, whether that's a nonprofit, that's in the church world, that's at home, or all of the above. Let's take. There's a lot of hard-earned wisdom I want to apply from that. As we start, which is famous last words, it could be a very like a preacher's message. As we start to wrap up, is a very nebulous, wide-ranging thing. Want to kind of switch just to some practicals that have helped you stay healthy, that have helped you stay, doing well as a person, as a mother, a leader, a wife, and maybe give you a little break on some of the deeper questions. But I'll probably slide one back in. We'll see. So with that in mind, what's your morning routine look like for you? It's the question that I've been asking a lot of people on the podcast and hearing interesting, different answers. But morning routine, that could also include like your bedtime, which sounds like, tuck yourself in.
Yeah.
Coffee, tea, workouts, you're a pastor, spiritual practices. Yeah. What does that look like? Is it consistent, changing a lot?
Well, I think you said earlier, I'm a mom of 3. They're 5, 3, and 15 months.
Very cute. They're my nieces and nephew.
Yeah. And so what I would say is that my personality would want a more rigid end of the day and beginning of the day.
Yep.
And right now, season of life is, I have to have a little bit of like soft edges, timing. It looks different. There's ideal, and then there's what's fairly consistent.
They don't just always stay silent and asleep until the exact time you need them to wake up.
Yeah, your kids don't do. Yeah,
oh man. Right. Let's talk about. I know a lot after having about a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
It's teasing.
Yeah. No. So saying that, kind of my morning routine would be to get up. Ideal, really, really winning the day is 5 a.m. But I would say the soft edges are 5, 6 would be kind of a later. And Lord willing, none of our kids have woken up yet, but that's debatable, right? And so typically, like I said, coffee would be made because of our automatic.
The day before.
We've timed it the day before, and would come down and have a cup of coffee and just spend time reading the Word, kind of getting back into the practice of journaling. And so that used to be something I did more, but really just taking longer times to really let something from what I read in scripture just kind of go deeper in my heart. And then kind of depending on the day, my husband, there's a few days a week where he's actually already on a call in the morning at 7 a.m. So those mornings it's really tight and I've done my devos, gotten ready. Other mornings, if he has a later start, then would try to get a workout in. One of the best things we've done recently was what we call a pain cave.
Which is from, I think, triathletes, which your husband's a triathlete.
Yeah, so Riley does triathlons, and so we have now kind of a home gym, and we call it our pain cave. And so we go in, and I have various workout gear out there. And so kind of where I've had to have flexibility is ideally morning would be the workout. If not, now having it at home would be either right after work in the afternoon or when the kids go to bed. So those would be like in one of those three windows would work to get a workout in and do devotions in the morning. And then one of the things, because I do work full time and have three kids, really try to be super present in the morning. So when our kids are up, try to be more present with them and just interact and have that be kind of a special moment as much as I can in the morning. And then in the evenings pre their bedtime. And so in those pockets, really try to be intentional.
And maybe a little bit more even on kind of like the health and fitness side. Any more details on that? Like what are you doing?
Yeah. So I grew up loving soccer, and we've talked a lot about leadership. And so I have just most of my life been in some environment of like leading, coaching people. So I actually love being coached, told what to do. So my workout routine has changed. I've done things like F45 where it's, I've had a personal trainer. F45 is like team training with like coaches, basically trainers helping coach your movements.
Yeah, 45 minutes of functional fitness, right?
Yeah. So 45 minutes of functional fitness. This season, I'm seeking to become a runner, someone who likes running. So I'm aspiring to do a half marathon probably in June. And so I've been in the last about 4 months just giving myself to more running, training. My husband is a fairly good runner, and so he's coaching me in that area. And so I'm kind of doing training and running as well as some strength training at home. How
important do you think, and I mean, I know everyone kind of probably think exercise is somewhat important, but any specifics on why or how exercise is important, just as a high functioning person, guy or gal?
Yeah. I mean, for
maybe specifically as a gal.
Yeah, as a gal. I think that for me personally, it's one of just a moment where I can fully just kind of disconnect. So I'm not texting, I'm not calling, maybe I'm listening to an audiobook, but
or this podcast.
Teasing. Yeah. And so I find mentally, actually, it's really kind of a freeing time. It's like I'm challenging my body. We use our minds so much, and a lot of what we're doing is a lot of thought work. And so to kind of not be fully like using our mind and more strengthening our body. And I think just honestly, just kind of boost my self-esteem and just like, wow, I did a hard thing. I accomplished something. I pressed past a hard level. I remember in F45, I think it was after maybe my second child, and there was these box jumps, and I remember seeing people, they jump up on these high boxes, and I watched them do that, and I was thinking like, oh man, I probably trip. I'm kind of short, and I don't think I could do that. That's what my thought process was. But I remember we had to do it, and I was like, I jumped, and I landed it. It was just like, whoa, it was a simple thing, but it was like, wow, I pressed past hard. And so I just think it's, obviously there's the level of like, we're to be stewards of the bodies God's given us. I want to be healthy. My husband and I, like, we want to be mobile and flexible and have strength, well into our, for our whole life. Like and so I think you make those priorities now and choose health now. And so, always growing, always trying to learn in that area. And I've had to learn to be flexible. So
Yeah.
it's shifted. There's what I maybe would love to do. Time doesn't always allow. And so,
I like it. And that's become so far kind of a recurring theme on the podcast, talking with different great people, is the way you phrased it was cool. Soft edges.
yeah.
Like, and other times in conversation, it's kind of like, have the ideal. Here's the ideal, but here's the level of flex I need to be okay with.
Yeah.
And so I liked how you said, okay, here's the soft edges. Here's ideal, 5 a.m. The far soft edge,
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way of putting it. Well, thanks for sharing on that. Any other just practical tips just that have just helped you on a kind of a week-to-week basis as a leader, as a wife, as a mom, things you do, like, maybe you always get a Costco chicken and make a certain meal and it's just easy, or you always do this date, or what's anything like that you found that might just be helpful to everyone listening?
Yeah. I mean, Costco is a great Costco carnitas. They're great. I think one thing I'm having to learn with 3 kids and the nature of pastoring, you set your ideal schedule, and then sometimes things shift that. And so I'm having to learn to be okay to set your like non-negotiables and then pivot fast in the negotiables, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think just flexibility, like I think as moms, especially wives, we set really sometimes unrealistic expectations of ourselves. So like one practical is just, I heard when I was pregnant with my first son, my only son, but with my first child, I heard someone, pastor's wife that had kids and was just talking about, she said, no one else should or can be my husband's wife.
Yeah.
No one else can be my children's mother. And she listed some things. She said, but someone else could clean the house, could do the books, or there's certain tasks. Yeah. And for those moms, and this would be for homemakers too, but as moms, there's some non-negotiables that I don't want anyone else to try to fill in my life. But for us, like we pay a couple times a month for a house cleaner.
Yeah.
Because I realize if I do have limited time, there's some things that we could outsource in order to spend more time with our kids, or spend more time in what are the non-negotiables, what we value. Another thing is just there are things we cut in our budget and are more careful in order. We value vacations. We value getting away, spending time. And so I think even budgeting to your values. I know you're passionate about that.
Yeah.
But right. And so I think even just sitting down, if you're single, sitting down with yourself doing this, or with your spouse, is just saying, what are our values? And am I giving energy to those things? And then the things that aren't the end of the world, not beating yourself up over if they don't get accomplished.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Setting those non-negotiables up, but then everything else that is adjustable or negotiable, being quick to not have that argument about it, or be disappointed in yourself about it, or
right.
That's really good. Okay, well, final last couple of questions. One is, as a Christian, a wife, a mother, a pastor, what scares you most about the direction of society right now? What concerns you? And then the opposite question, what excites you? Where's a place of hope? You're seeing a trend. You're like, man, I'm excited about that. But first, what we've seen interesting answers on this question. For you, what scares you right now?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think from a pastor's perspective, deconstructionism, seeing people just, kind of deconstruct their faith, deconstruct sexuality, deconstruct morality, like so many things. And just the lack. So I think that, like, an area of deconstruction. I think we hit on this, the individualisticness of just kind of, I do my thing. If I don't really care, just kind of the rejection the wisdom of godly community, godly counsel. And I think that comes with deconstructing, is like our, as followers of Christ, we were created as communal people. We are created for community. We're created for relationship with God and others. So I think married to that, I think deconstructing at any level is when I begin to deconstruct truth and deconstruct, there's kind of no limit. And I think that's alarming. And then the deconstructing of community and.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on that, just that kind of like maybe nothing sacred.
Yeah.
It's just everything you're taking down. You're just, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. We're going to pick and choose. We were having a conversation, I think yesterday, is like all the cart morality, basically.
Right.
All the cart, when our conversation about accountability to leaders and the way you should interact with leaders. And it's like, well, I'll pick and choose the part.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when we begin to, and that starts like when we deconstruct like the authority of God's word, when we deconstruct and all of a sudden there's just, there's kind of no limit. And I think what's scary is sometimes it always starts in seed form. It starts in this little, it's the first sin. Did God say that? What did God, is deconstructing actually what God actually said. And so I think in society, when we don't have, I think there's a hunger in people even for, you see on the counter, there seems to be this hunger for sacredness and even just taking in beauty. So there's kind of this counterculture that I think is wanting to pause and reflect and really recognize, no, there is higher authority. There is a God, and I'm not him. And, but I think that's scary in our society, is deconstructing and then deconstructing away from community. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I agree with that. How about what's something that maybe other people aren't seeing, or maybe everyone's seeing it, but that you're seeing, you go, man, I'm hopeful about the future. I'm seeing this trend, or I'm seeing God do something happening in society that you're excited about.
Yeah, I think first it will sound kind of negative. I think in our culture, when we look and it looks really dark. And so I've heard a lot of people, we're raising young kids right now, and I've heard older people or not even just people in general say things like, man, I'm so glad I'm not raising kids in this season, or, it's so dark out there. And I actually think that what's happening, even in what we talked about deconstructionism, is that it's forcing people who are followers of Christ to make a more firm stand. In even seasons behind, it was like you could kind of almost seem neutral, even if you weren't neutral. You just didn't really have to say anything. But I think it's actually created a stand where people are standing up and saying, no, I do build my life upon the word of God. Jesus is my savior, and I do stand for marriage, and I do stand for godly families, and you know what I mean? And so I think there's actually then this rising up, not in like a wrong, just to create a polarization, but it's reaffirming. And I think what's cool is to see this emergence of all ages, young and old, that are rising up and saying, no, I'm going to be vocal about my faith. I'm going to be vocal about being in God's house. And so I think even like through 2020, you saw the negative of, there were people that just got destroyed and pulled away from godly community. But it also, I think, revealed a remnant of people who said, no, we will be a part of God's community. We will be a part of following the Lord, if that makes sense. And so I think in that it's hopeful, as man, there is an army of people that are rising up with right convictions, right heart for the Lord, and standing for truth in love, but are not bowing to culture, bowing to deconstructionism.
Oh, it's so good. And I know even we had a conversation on that yesterday a little bit at our staff meeting. A topic came up, but I've been thinking about that where you said the remnant. And I think in Christendom, that's a theme all through the Bible, is God is building what the Christians call the bride of Christ. It's that community that is, that it's his bride. He's gonna come back for that the true church, and it's not always our job to say who is and who isn't that. That's a much more specific situation, but but just rejoicing in that he is building. There are true believers.
Yeah.
There are true dedicated people to following Jesus and celebrating that and not letting people that aren't buying that truth discourage.
Yeah. And I mean, we live in a part of the country that kind of is notoriously and statistically would be very, I mean, our city is one of the most de-churched cities in the country, percentage wise.
Yeah.
And yet God's moving.
Yep.
People are getting saved. People are getting healed, set free, families restored. And that's, I know pastors and leaders all over the Northwest and the West Coast. And like, there are people in places that the world would look and go, oh man, is anything good happening there? And it's like, yeah, God's moving. It is.
And it's not just, I think what you're saying is it's not just in spite of these challenges, but actually in some ways because of the challenges, it's created an opportunity. It's created, you're going to have to pick a side. You're going to have to be galvanized one way or the other.
Yeah. It's kind of that, what we said with Esther, like, okay, like God's put you in this position for such a time as this. So you can stand, or God will raise somebody else. But I think it's caused a large remnant of people to rise up and go, no, like we know we're called here. We're planted in this city in this time to be a part of change, to be a part of making an impact for the glory of God.
That's so good. Final two questions, and just thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being a courageous leader, someone that I believe that men and women can look up to, and you're leading men and women in our church. And just thank you. I appreciate the conversation, the different just elements from just you sharing from your life, your story, from the book, Engage Leadership. I appreciate it. And final two questions. One is this: what are you most curious about right now? Could be anything you care to share. What are you most curious about right now?
Okay. I'm always kind of like dabbling in multiple veins. So there's always this little bit of like entrepreneurial side in me. And so I'd say in that there's kind of like, multiple veins in that. And probably just various like side hustles and things, even just to, outside sources of income and things. So learning just ideas, even if it's things that I'm not doing or going to do for a long time. So I think there's always kind of that, dipping into that. In the health side, like I said, kind of growing curiosity in the area of running and just getting better and faster and stronger and longer endurance. So curiosity in that vein. In kind of the leadership church world right now, leaning into kind of the area of discipleship and then personally, just really like deeper formation personally in who God's made me to be. And like, it's kind of a practice in discipleship of like spiritual formation. And so I think personally just leaning into some stuff in that area.
Very cool. And then final question, what is your personal favorite question and why? What's the question you like to ask yourself or ask other people, and why?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on like context of questions. So I will give a question if I'm meeting with maybe a leader or somebody that I'm directly coming kind of as like a disciple to learn.
Yeah.
I may have like my list of questions, and then somewhere in there is probably going to be, what's the question I should be asking that I'm not asking?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's usually always something that I don't like. There's always something I don't know or realize that they're like, you're asking a question there's way more I can give you, Yeah. So eventually get to that point of like, what's the question I should be asking?
Yeah.
Where am I missing?
That's a great one. What's the question I didn't ask? What's the question I should have been asking?
Yeah.
And it invites them to...
Yeah, it even is saying, hey, you have permission to speak into something you see that I don't even realize I should be aware of, a blind spot or a good thing, you know? So eventually getting to that point, is there a question I should be asking you? Or so that would probably be kind of the question in a learning leadership setting. And then I love just hearing people's story, their journey, who they are. I love sitting with people that are maybe different careers and things, and just tell me about it. That, different education backgrounds and learning their story, learning their journey.
So cool. Well, hey, on behalf of everybody here watching and listening to the podcast, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate everything you shared, and have a great week, everybody. So thankful to have had Natalie Aman on the podcast. Just an amazing conversation. Great to be with my sister and to listen to her and learn from her as a leader, as a communicator, as someone that has been doing this for many, many years. And I believe there's something that each of us can take from it and hopefully is encouraged. And if we're discouraged in our leadership and are making a difference in this world, that we get back up, that we would keep engaging in leadership. And so as we're wrapping up today, I'm going to have in the show notes some information so you can follow up more with Natalie Aman, a link to her book, Engage Leadership, and ways you can follow up with her online, on social. And with that, just want to remind you to rate and review the show. It helps us grow our community, make a difference, and just have more fun as a community. So please rate and review it. And remember that I send out a free weekly newsletter, The Wise Letter, each Thursday. If that interests you, we're talking about health, wealth, wisdom. They're usually short and sweet and adding hopefully a lot of value. Go to thewiseletter.com and subscribe today. And with that, I will see you for our next show very soon. We're sending out new podcast conversations every first and third Tuesday of the month. With that, have a great day, everybody. Thank you.